Welcome to Love and Trauma, the real deal. I'm Danielle Sebastian, best-selling author, coach, and yes, I've been through the marriage trenches myself. This show is all about how to actually deal with trauma in relationships and make it work without losing your mind. If you're ready for honest talk, no fluff, and tools that cut through the noise, tune in, because let's face it, love can be a bit of a mess, but it's a mess worth figuring out. This is Love and Trauma, the real deal.
Today, we're diving into one of the most difficult and often unspoken realities of trauma shaped by trauma, of relationships shaped by trauma. Our guest, Zoltan Zenkarali, knows this terrain all too well. Zoltan isn't just a statistician that teaches at MSU. He's a coach, a truth teller, and a fierce advocate for empathetic men that are navigating the turbulent waters of a marriage impacted by unresolved trauma. After experiencing his own struggles in marriage, Zoltan founded Breakthrough New Life to support faithful men in preserving their God-given destiny, even amidst the heartbreak of false allegations and legal challenges. His mission is to empower men with strategies to protect their hearts, their families, and their futures, all while staying true to the love they hold for their wives. Zoltan sheds light on the rarely discussed realities of empathetic men facing domestic violence allegations, and he's here to share how they can find hope, dignity, and restoration, even in the most challenging circumstances. Now, I ended up meeting Zoltan about a year ago because we were in the same position trying to help partners of survivors of childhood trauma. And I really have been delving deep into male survivors and the female partner end of things, but I have really wanted to delve deeper into the differences if it is a female trauma survivor in a relationship with a male partner. And so Zoltan and I have been doing a lot of work to try and understand the differences, because I think the way that trauma plays out in relationships does differ between men and women survivors. So we're going to get really deep into the differences today. And if you've ever wondered how to navigate love, trust, and healing when trauma enters the picture, or if you're struggling to keep your own relationship afloat, this really is a conversation for you. So let's get real, let's get honest, and let's open the door to healing and love. And I will jump into my conversation with Zoltan.
Thank you so much for having me. It's very exciting. I love that you have this new show to discuss these things. And like you said, I heard you say that these things aren't discussed enough. We really want to make awareness about these things and help people.
Yes, and I definitely want to open up my perspective as well, to include not just female partners, but male partners. I'm really excited to do that today.
Awesome. Yes.
So tell me just a little bit about your background, your relationship, and we'll start there.
Okay. So I live in Texas. For some reason, that feels important to say. I didn't grow up here, but I've been here for a while. And during that time, as I went through my essentially late 30s and 40s, I just felt I want to be married. I always wanted to be married. And so there was this point where I was really seeking that. My name is Hungarian, so my family's Hungarian. My dad was a composer, so a lot of my life is about music, but also statistics, because I thought, well, I better do something practical. And so I've got that in my back pocket. So there have been a lot of things that make up who I am and what I've studied and what I'm interested in. And it all just basically culminated to this time here in Dallas, Texas, working for SMU, and that's when I had met my wife. And the focus of that I was really excited about was that at the beginning, it was very clear that I'm a Christian, she's a Christian, and I wasn't always this was something new for me. And so that was a really important thing that I finally just set everything aside, trying to pursue on my own, and waited until I felt like through prayer, this was the one for me. And then also one other thing that's interesting is that we were both single parents at that point. She had a daughter and I had a son around the same age. And so that's essentially the beginning of this journey for me.
Oh, so you brought in 2 kids into the marriage. How did that go? Blending families.
Well, initially it was great. I guess I should preface in the beginning, it was kind of an unconventional way that we met, and everything picked up pretty quickly. And I knew, so I mean, we'll talk about this, I think, pretty soon here. But I knew up front when I had proposed to her pretty quickly, because I had prayed about it and it all came quickly. And it's like, okay, this is the one. I'm just going to be direct, right? And so I knew that she had trauma from her background. And so even in the beginning, it was like an honor for me as a man, like thanking God, like, okay, this might not be easy. I'm not sure what exactly this entails, but you've given me this precious woman to be my wife. And okay, I want to be her protector and, be the dad for the children. And, my son really could see me being romantically together with my wife. Those are things that were what we aspired to. But right from the beginning, there were difficulties where I was trying to just get all 4 of us kind of separated from drama into our own little home where we could enjoy.
So you knew during dating and before you were married that your wife had a traumatic past.
Yes. And I think when I look back on the decisions, there are decisions that I think people might be able to say, well, gosh, why did you choose to do that? Or why did you guys do it this way or that way? I proposed to her very early on. So we met at this Christian conference, basically a big concert, Harvest America and Texas Cowboy Stadium, whatever. Greg Laurie was a pastor from California. He does it every year. And so it was just a fun, exciting beginning that we randomly met and started texting. And I just felt from the beginning, even the first time that we were going to be meeting together after several weeks of getting to know each other very well in terms of our ideals, that I needed to be direct. And that was through prayer. And it was a little scary for me because it's not like anything I've done, but I proposed very early on. And I think she was flattered, but that's the one thing as she considered that, she said, well, there's something you should know, if you're asking to marry me or to get married. And so she did tell me about these things early on. And for me, it was really bonding, like, wow. Like, I mean, it crushes your soul to think that somebody has gone through such horrible things. And so I remember I would hold her and she was really tense a lot. And in the beginning stages, she would just completely relax with me. And those are the things you would hope for. Right. And so those things were really, it was endearing. It was positive. But of course, as we know, when there's that depth of trauma, other things come around and surface where it doesn't stay in that kind of idyllic environment. But so initially,
those of us who haven't had a traumatic past,
yes.
Do you feel like we just don't know? You didn't know what to expect, I'm assuming.
Right.
from how that would play out in your relationship.
Exactly. And I don't know that she necessarily knew how it was going to play out, but I think she had a better idea because she had been dealing with it, right? And I think what's difficult, and again, I'm speaking as a man who found a beautiful lady, proposed, we got married, and even just the thought like, wow, she said yes to be with me forever. I mean, that's a big thing for a man, and I'm sure for a woman too. But it's such a big thing. And I think there probably is that sense of idealism, like, well, I can be that guy, and I can take care of her, and whatever comes, we'll figure it out. And what you're not prepared for is how dark of a hold the trauma has on her feelings and self-worth. I know that's a really, really big thing, the self-worth issue, but also even the kind of like suspicion of whatever might be coming because of what has already been. And so that kind of sentimental, loving heart that an empathetic person might have, like you said, someone that hasn't suffered these things, is probably just has more of a full heart of, well, these are all the great possibilities. They don't have this huge set of horrific possibilities. And so possibilities are usually positive possibilities, right? During that time, you're trying harder. Like, something, it didn't go well, or something didn't go well, or there was kind of a blow up, or, oh my gosh, what happened? She retreated. And I, you don't necessarily understand their feelings or if there are any triggers. There are things that in hindsight, I had no idea she was experiencing until she was basically stating it kind of in a courtroom setting, but stating this is what happened, and this is what and that was the first time I could see, oh my gosh, that's what was going through her mind. Like, that whole time I didn't really know. And like you said, we kind of put the best spin on it. And so I think what happened with me and the feelings that I had, and I think I've seen this with other men as well, that really love somebody that's hurt with childhood trauma like that, is that you want to give more, and even prove your love even more, or show even more, make even more gestures and overtures, try to talk even more about it, like just making more effort. And the hardest thing is to realize that it's not helping. It's not really received the way you think it should be received, or you thought it would be received. And in fact, it's almost counterproductive, like makes you even less believable. Oh, like, no, you're just lying now. Like, because it's maybe so implausible to them to think that that I would have such amount of love in my heart, maybe, you know what I mean? So the harder I tried, I was becoming more desperate, that the worse things got. So that's a real disconnect, I think. It's how can you possibly plan for that?
I want to get more into that, because that is something that I think that a lot that I have learned the most, is that a lot of the things that we've been taught to do when we communicate in conflict, a lot of the relationship advice that's out there was not successful,
Does
with
not
someone
work.
who had a traumatic past and were being triggered by everything I did or said.
Yeah. Yeah. And isn't that crazy? Because what's our support system? Well, here's our family church. Well, let's go talk to somebody. Okay. Well, and it's even good faith between the husband and wife. Like, okay, we need help. Let's go talk to somebody. And then we sit down and they say, okay, well, you need to do this and this and this. And it's just like you said, none of it works.
I am 100% in agreement, and we are going to get more into that, but tell me, are you and your wife still together?
We're not. So, but it's such a gray area in a lot of ways. So I gave you that 8-year window. The first 4 years were leading up to the real traumatic point for me, where the false allegations and everything came to a head, and there's an arrest, and there's my life, I felt, was just being destroyed and crumbling. And so I had to spend then the next 4 years really realizing I have to take care of myself. I have to take care of myself legally, financially, even with the children and any kind of allegations. I have to make sure my kids can see me. I didn't see my son for a long time. And then it finally got to a point where there's custody, there's some court intervention and a custody order. And so I got back to where I felt protected. I'm seeing my kids, and then the divorce happened. The divorce was finalized just last month. And so, but it was very drawn out, right? It was a long, drawn out process. And partly because, and this to me is really interesting, and I think this is true for a lot of men in my situation, is that at some point, the outside world sees a little bit more clearly what's going on in the relationship, and the man that's being accused of all the horrible things all of a sudden is redeemed. And that's a struggle then for my wife. Like, wait a minute, all of my women's help support groups and everything, and CPS, everyone's been telling me that I need help, and they're helping me against the bad man and all these things. And so for her, all of a sudden, it's like, wait, why aren't people on my side anymore? And that's almost heartbreaking to watch. I mean, there are some things that I've seen happen where she was so convinced. When you're convinced that you're in utter danger, or your kids are in utter danger, like life-threatening, like the end of the world kind of danger, it's traumatic. There's desperation. And for me to get a window into seeing, like, when she got certain paperwork and things, the desperation and the fear, it's heartbreaking. Like, you don't want anybody to feel that way about you, or just about being that afraid and in that much danger. So, I've tried as much as possible to keep that door open. I kept constantly trying to, you said, are we still together or not? That's the question, right? I'm giving you a very long answer. Just a few weeks ago, when my son finished soccer, she came and stayed with us all day, and stayed and watched a movie. And so those are the kind of gray areas where we're not together. We can't be together. She has to do work on her own. But then in other ways, my heart's still always open, even though technically she's not my wife. I still feel like that.
Thank you for sharing that. Everything with trauma is complicated, and there's no right or wrong answer for any of it. Yeah. And I really do encourage people to not worry about what other people think, and to do what needs to be done, because it's very complicated.
Yeah.
One of the things I do definitely want to make sure that we touch on is when we talked about how we didn't know what was coming, how that would affect, how the trauma would affect the relationship. Can you speak specifically to how that played out for you? Banging your head against the wall, trying to navigate the complexities of a relationship impacted by childhood trauma, it doesn't have to be this daunting. When you're married to a partner with unresolved childhood trauma, it can feel like you're walking on eggshells, never quite knowing what will set them off. No matter what you try, it feels like there's always something triggering another emotional response that seems completely out of context. And the harder you try to fix it, the more discouraged you feel. So what's the issue here? Navigating marriage with a trauma survivor is different. The love languages don't work. Date nights don't work.
Self-help books don't help. But here's the good news. I've created something that does work. Something built from years of hard-earned lessons and real-life experience. Ready to take the first step toward real change? Let's talk. I'm offering a free one-on-one call where we'll dive into what's going on in your relationship and figure out a way forward together. This isn't just another quick chat. It's a chance to finally be heard, to share what you're going through with someone who truly gets it. No judgment, just real support. So if you're ready to start making sense of it all and find a little more peace in your marriage, book your free call now. Your happiness, your peace, and your relationship are worth it. Let's do it together.
Your heart and not have people telling you what to do, in particular in this situation, because there is so much love. There's so much love in a man's heart for his wife. And on the outside, it appears like you're being attacked by a narcissistic, evil person. But you just know that's not the case. And so I think that's one of the hardest things to figure out as the spouse, as the husband, because there are many times when there's that sweetness. And when things get worse, of course, that the sweetness is less there and there's more antagonism, but it's just astounding. And it's so hard to understand, like, wait a minute, like, it's almost like a different person. You know, the one you love, and then there's the attacking. And so I think that is the most difficult thing to figure out how to handle that. And also the thing that you would never expect.
Describe how it felt when those accusations started coming your way and those behaviors.
It's the most difficult thing about it in the beginning is that you see what's happening. Like, you can see the pattern and it's happening more. Calling the police or even mother-in-law or whoever, just starting to make a lot of smoke. And you're like, wait, what? That's not me. And then also, because of the fear element, I don't know if I'll go ahead and say it here. I kind of coined a phrase. I don't know if anyone's come up with this, but trauma entitlement syndrome is kind of what I call it. That you're like, hey, that's so unfair. Like, why? That's not what happened. Why are you saying that about me? Right. And there's an element of her that really believes it. And so at the beginning, you're just saying, why are you being so unfair? Why are you trying to hurt me? Kind of a thing. As it progresses, I mean, once I was arrested for a misdemeanor, which again, I was the one trying to leave the house with the baby to get away from strife, and somehow it was turned on me. Later, with a felony accusation and charge, and I got arrested and I was in jail. And when I found out what it was, I was shocked. Like, what? Like what happened? How in the world did I get arrested for this thing? And so when it gets really serious, part of it is because she's going to hide that. If she's afraid and she really believes that there's imminent danger and it's directed at you, the entire care infrastructure, I guess, for women that are in trouble, because some women are really in trouble. Some women really need to get away from someone that's really beating them up, and we need systems for help for that. But when that's turned on someone that's not doing that, that's how you're being treated. Everything is hidden from you. You don't want to give him the address. You don't see anything. So it's like years in to the legal battle, when you finally get the gumption to say, I have to take my life back, it's like 6 years later, you found out what she was really saying to people. And that's even worse. But it's grieving. I mean, how did I feel? I mean, there are points when I couldn't do anything, and I was fortunate that I was on unemployment or whatever it was, where I just spent hours grieving and crying, and it's because you care, and that person that you care about, how could they possibly think these things about you or say these things about you? So it's a lot of grieving. And then what I'm really passionate about is helping men have strategies, because you can heal if you don't stay beaten down. And that's a real danger. And so when I was able to get my son back, and I saw that authorities were starting to decide in my favor, it's this tremendous sigh of relief, and just thank God, because it feels like your life is about to be destroyed, and there's nothing you can do about it until finally you do. You can do something about it. So
thank you for sharing that. Oh, are there things that earlier on in the relationship, before things got to this terrible point where they ended up getting, are there things that you wish you would have identified and done differently back then that you could share with people?
Yes, very much so. We kind of alluded to it earlier. Men like to fix things, like, I can be the knight in shining armor. I'm going to show up and fix everything. And I love you. And, I'm going to help, I'm going to protect you. And that leads into some really precarious situations where, almost like coming off like controlling. But it's not so much that it's controlling. It's just that there's this atmosphere and environment of chaos. And so, usually it's a good thing to have someone step into chaos and create order. But I think I would have done things much more differently, because if I had known that it wasn't possible for me to come in and try to create that kind of order that way. People will always say, well, you just have to have boundaries. You have to take care of yourself. She might do such and such, but you just have to respond, in this way with the boundaries. And that's really hard to do when you have so much emotion vested. And I think for men in particular, men need respect. I would say the polar opposite of respect is you're a rapist, molester, it's the worst possible thing for a man to be accused of the worst possible things. It's the polar opposite of respect. And so it leads to anger. But in this dynamic, it's an escalation that happens. And you find yourself being someone you don't even want to be. I really wish that I had worked on my ability to not care enough to step away more, to have that be more of my modus operandi, right? To be more of that stoic. Well, I remember my dad doing that. Like, my mom would get all upset and say, well, I can't talk to you like this. And he would go for a walk and be like, I guess Dad's just not going to talk. And like, it's something I probably would have done more, is to just separate more and less, but try to convince, that re-engaging, the constant re-engaging. I would have done less of that.
Separating yourself from essentially what are trauma triggers in your partner, separating yourself from those things that are coming at you and understanding where they're coming from better.
Yeah. And I think the reason it's so difficult in this setting, this is a very, the chance to be talking with you like this is amazing, because it's so different. The dynamic is so different. Part of the reason the emotion is there and it's hard to separate from the triggers is that the triggers result in these personal attacks. And so maybe if I had more thick skin, it's really difficult to take those kinds of personal attacks that are directed directly at you. So I don't know. I think in some of our discussions, we talked about triggers, maybe that your husband had, or that a husband would have, that aren't necessarily directly at you, but it's this mystery. And so, and it's so difficult because it's such a mystery. In my case, it's not a mystery. It's right in your face, and it's not very enjoyable.
Yeah, there was definitely this phase where these behaviors were coming that I did not know that there was a trauma history.
Mhm.
And that is more common, I think, to your point, with male survivors, where in many cases they'd rather take that secret to the grave
Yeah.
with them
Mhm.
than talk about it or even admit to themselves that it happened.
Mhm.
But then once that disclosure did happen,
Mhm.
I experienced very similar things where the blame and the projection of those feelings became very personal.
Mhm.
And I took
Interesting.
all
Okay.
that on, but I wish that I would have had more resources like you and I are doing
Mhm.
today, and more conversations to understand that those are responses that the trauma survivor used to protect themselves when they were children, that worked for them, that got them to the point where they are today, that then don't serve them in adult relationships. And understanding that better and being able to separate ourselves from those responses is one of the first steps.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm just at the beginning of that. I think the first thing that someone like in my situation desperately needs to do, and it's like this drawn out desperation of several years, is to make sure that you're legally protected, because there's so much of an attack on even just the custody and the marriage breakups, and being left in the dust, taken for all your money, take all your dignity, all your reputation, everything. It's brutal. And so, and you see it happen to people. And so then when it's happening to you, to just finally get to that place where like, okay, I think I'm okay. No matter what else is thrown at me, there's this solid foundation. And then it's like, then you can finally start disconnecting yourself from the trauma reactions and triggers.
At what point do you wish that you would have seen some of those warning signs that that could be where things were headed, to where your reputation and your own experience was going to be at risk?
I, I think the answer to that question may shock you, or may not be obvious. I prayed about that quite a bit, walking long walks, crying out to God. And I literally asked God, did I have to get arrested? Did I have to? And the answer I got back was yes. And some people may not believe in all of that, but when I look back, there's an aspect of the severe amount of trauma inflicted on me, or the severe amount of turmoil on the whole situation, that I think was necessary by the time it got to the courts, for people to have compassion for me, and for my wife to then have to be kind of out of options, and be met with the idea that maybe she was wrong. And I'm still very confident in this, that the long-term result still ends up somehow, in whatever way God brings it to be, resolution, healing, and having my wife have her trauma resolved, to do the work, right? I mean, there's just work involved. I can't do it for her. And I'm just assuming that this is what had to happen for some of these things to get dredged up and just be dealt with at some point.
It took this for her to get to the point where maybe there's more going on here that I can work on.
I think so. And I can hope, but one of the really important things is it's not my job. That's for her. And I think as I start coaching men more in this situation, that's a hard one to internalize for them. They want to keep trying.
Absolutely. That person who you met, that person who was there for the first 4 years, that's the person deep down underneath there.
Yeah.
That's there. And the trauma has made that not come to the surface and in a way change them.
Right.
But that deep down it's underneath there, and you just hope that they can tap into that and fix that part of themselves, because they do deserve to be in a loving relationship.
Yeah. And I did listen to your first episode. I thought it was awesome. You both talked about self-worth quite a bit. And the whole time I just completely could relate, because I would say things, all your life you go through, and maybe you have a few relationships, or just your relationship with mom, dad, brothers, sisters, whoever. You make a compliment, you tell somebody how awesome they are. It makes them feel good and makes you feel good. And, you high five and you go, meet again. And that's not what I experienced. I would give her some compliment or something, and she just wouldn't receive it. And I remember so many times the argument was, no, I do love you that much. No, you are awesome. And I could just see what a struggle that is, that I couldn't even relate to. I couldn't fathom it, but it's very real.
That is definitely a consistent theme, is that the self-worth, the shame that they feel, they hate themselves. So how could anybody else love them?
Right. And then unfortunately, then that turns this very sincere expression in like a suspicion about, oh, so then what are you trying, oh, you're just full of it, and then that becomes that's where things start to go downhill. Any and every time you're trying to be loving and gracious, like, oh, you're just full of it, full of bleep. But so that's what I love about what you're doing, is just getting tools for people to be able to love and receive love.
Yes, it can be done. You've had a pretty traumatic experience. Have you been able to get some help for yourself?
Yeah, I think so. I have a really strong support group, in terms of, to get through this time, I had my Monday Bible study, my Friday Bible study, the people that knew us. I was very encouraged the way that family, friends rallied around me and supported me. There's nothing they could do either, but they were supportive. And then along the way, I really was still trying to get resources for my wife as well. So I remember one of the things that brought us back together, we've had several times where we've tried to reconcile, which is like miraculous. Really, it's like feels the miracle of all miracles. And of course, it's not lasting yet because there's still work to be done. But I purchased a PTSD program for her. It was like an online program. And so I've learned a lot. I've done some of those things myself. There are all sorts of exercises that you can do. And so I feel pretty good. I feel like I've been able to process those things as much as you can.
I really commend you. And I want this show to be about the real deal.
Mhm.
And the real deal is that this is happening in our relationship. And we can just put our head in the sand and pretend like it's not happening. Or really brave people could say, this is what has worked for me, and this is what I can help you with to get through this difficult period. I think
Yeah.
that people just want to not think that this is happening, or they're like, this is just a really rare case. And it's not.
It's
So
not. That's right.
that is why we do what we do. And we are hitting on the things that are really happening that are tragic, but it's real.
Yeah, it's real. And like you said, for people to know that there are resources, that there are other people that understand, because it's less common, obviously. It's less common to be in that situation, but it's very real and it's happening to a lot of people. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing today all of this. And thank you
Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful. This is awesome. I love your concept. I love the show. It's just a wonderful thing that we have the ability to be able to just tell our story and just help people.
Thank you. And I have a feeling that this isn't going to be our last conversation that we are going to have.
That's right.
And I know that we are going to do our best to help other people in our situation and make a difference. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today. And I hope that you found that conversation as compelling as I did. And there are a few take-home messages that I want everyone to hear from this conversation. And I want everybody who's in a difficult relationship currently and doesn't know how to handle things, and you're just struggling trying to understand what's going on, I want you to hear from this story and from this interview that you are not alone, and that it is time for us to stop the silence around these struggling relationships. The second thing that I want people to take from this is that it has been a consistent theme in the shows that I've done so far, and can't wait to do many, many more, but that often our relationships end up hitting rock bottom before we end up where we start talking about things and we start seeking help. And I'm really hoping that by telling these stories, people can learn from the people who have been through this in the past and maybe start making some changes in their relationship before it does hit rock bottom and get to some of these extreme circumstances that may be occurring in our relationships. And third, I just want you all to hear that if you have suffered trauma, if you are in a relationship with someone who has experienced trauma, those coping mechanisms and emotions and the volatility and ups and downs that you're experiencing, they can be dealt with. There are tools out there that can help you create new patterns in your relationship. It's not easy. It's not a quick fix, but it is things that you can learn and start making a difference with today. And so Zoltan and I are here for that. So you can see our contact information. I will include Zoltan's in all of the descriptions. So if you are in this position, you are not alone. So please reach out. Thank you again for joining me on Love and Trauma, The Real Deal.
All right, that's a wrap for today on Love and Trauma, The Real Deal. Big thanks to my guests for sharing their insights. Couldn't have done it without you. Now, for those of you looking to take this journey further, I've got something special. Head to my website to grab Real Tactics, Real Healing, a survivor's playbook for navigating a relationship with a trauma survivor. It's packed with everything you need to know, do, and say to navigate the emotional minefield, find your balance, and regain your self-worth and happiness.